So I've been thinking this week about what's in a name. Your name is important to you. You may have been given a name that was passed down for generations in your family. You might be named for one particular beloved relative. You might have a name that was a favorite name. One of your parents just loved that name. Or a name with meaning they thought would fit you, or maybe the name of a biblical character that they admired. Now, my kids have a combination of family names from characters in books that I admired or my husband admired. There's a few descriptive names like Sage and Wren. And then you might have a nickname. Now, I was actually given the name Mary Ann, which is the name of my mother and my great-grandmother, and I think another great-great down the line. But since my mom went by Mary Ann, they gave me the nickname Mimi, and it stuck, and that's sort of always been who I felt like I was. And don't ask my husband, because it's confused a lot of banks and schools and stuff. So. But then again, Dr. Graham Walker has a gray beard now, but he had red hair when he was a baby, and his family all call him Red. So if you want to sneak up behind him sometime and yell, "Hey, Red," he will turn around. Our names are important, and the names in the Bible are important and meaningful. And the story that we read this morning is about names. It's about given names and nicknames, and it's even about city names and titles. Now, at this point in their travels, Jesus and his entourage have traveled, and they make a pit stop in the district of Caesarea Philippi. This is where he asks his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And that strikes me as kind of a strange question. Like, what are people saying about me? Is he concerned about his reputation? What's the word on the street? Are we taking opinion polls? Maybe like an internet influencer. Am I getting enough positive comments? But not only that, he throws in a strange name. Instead of just saying, "Who do people say that I am?" He says, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" Now they know, the people he's talking to, what he's talking about, because this title, the Son of Man, refers back to the book of Daniel, where it says, "A Son of Man will appear in the face of the great empires," representing one that God will send to fulfill the Jewish hope of being liberated from oppression. There's deep meaning in that title. Now, the disciples say they have heard people suggesting that Jesus might be John the Baptist come back after he was killed by Herod, or maybe he's Elijah or Jeremiah come back, or both of those prophets were expected to return before the actual Messiah comes. And then Jesus asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" And there was probably a long silence there, and then Simon says, "You're the Messiah," and he adds, "the Son of the living God." Now, this second part has significant meaning because of where they are standing when he says it. For example, in the first century, in the port city of Myra, what's now Turkey, there was a large inscription prominently displayed that read, "Son of a God, Emperor of land and sea, benefactor and savior of the whole world." And it's an inscription to the divine Augustus Caesar. Even the name Augusta means worthy of worship. This is the kind of inscription that was written all over the Roman Empire. It was displayed in cities, particularly cities that wanted to make sure that Caesar knew that they were loyal to him and his government, so that basically he wouldn't come and send his armies to destroy them. Caesar called himself Son of God and Savior and expected all others to do the same. So Jesus has carefully chosen this site to have this conversation. Caesarea Philippi, even Caesarea, has Caesar in the name. It was a regional capital for the Roman Empire. It was north of Galilee, and as far as we know, the only time he took his disciples that far north. And he asks them, "Who do you say that I am?" As they're making their way through these villages. "What do I mean to you? Who am I to you?" So when Simon answers, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God," he's basically saying, I get it. Caesar is not Lord. You are. Caesar is not the Son of God. You are. Caesar is not the authority under whom we want to live our lives. Simon recognizes that Jesus is not just inviting them into a religion that will be complicit with the Caesar's government and that empire. Instead, Jesus is inviting them and us into a new kingdom that is characterized by God's love. Jesus is giving him a choice between that violent power of Caesar as Lord and Jesus with this message of a loving God. And Simon is choosing Jesus. And Jesus and his followers continue to use these titles like Son of God and Savior and Lord, the same titles that Caesar used. And that's basically what got him killed. And the early church leaders followed by using these titles to challenge Caesar's authority. They were putting their faith in a new kind of kingdom and a new kind of politics. And it got a lot of them killed too. Many were martyred in the early years. So in this place, in this conversation, in this moment, this is where Jesus changes Simon's name, or at least gives him a nickname, one that's going to stick. Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. Now I tell you, you are Peter. On this rock I will build my congregation, and the gates of death will not prevail against it. So Peter was not his given name, not a family name. Peter is a Greek word, petros, meaning rock or stone. And Jesus gives Simon this nickname, Peter, in keeping with a character trait that he saw within him. Now, I don't know if you noticed this, but recently, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has joined the board of directors for the WWE, the World Wrestling Entertainment. And the company has granted Johnson full ownership and trademark of the name The Rock. Now, I really like The Rock as an actor, but the truth is that name was already taken a long time ago. And changing names is not unusual in the scriptures, in the Hebrew tradition. The Bible has many examples of names that were changed, and God is usually the one bestowing the new name. In Genesis, at critical moments in his life, Abram, which means exalted father, becomes Abraham, ancestor of a multitude. And Jacob, meaning he who grasps the heel, is given the name Israel, God's strives, or the one who strives with God. That's because actually he was a twin who was holding on to his brother's heel when he came into the world, and then later in life he had to wrestle with God. It's actually a long story of sibling rivalry, and we'll have to take that one up at another time. But there were many times when names were changed to show something important was happening, or someone had a characteristic about them that would be important. So Jesus sees in Simon a man of rock, someone who is solid and dependable. And this name recalls the use of a rock as a metaphor for God's dependability and strength, as we read in Psalm 19. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. So Peter proclaims Jesus as the Messiah, the one who will bring liberation to the oppressed, though not through warring empires, but through the love of God that he has been demonstrating as they travel this path of life together. And Jesus affirms who he believes Peter to be. When things get rocky, Peter will hold on to this memory. And then every time someone calls him by the name Peter, he will feel that affirmation over and over again. The names and the affirmations we receive can shape our identity and our self-worth, as well as our purpose in life. Do you have a nickname? What word would describe you, maybe at this stage of your life, that would feel like an affirmation of who you are? Are you the one who is kind? Are you the organizer? Hopefully not the equalizer. That's kind of violent show, but is there a word that says, this is who I am? This is an affirmation of who I know myself to be, and I know God knows me to be. Now, I also like this quote from Reverend Yvonne Delk. She said, "I refuse to allow those who did not see my beauty to deter me from becoming the woman God has called me to be. I ignored the names that limited my call. I answered to the names that affirmed my call. It is not what they call you that matters, it is what you answer to." I like that idea. People can sometimes try to use hurtful names to insult us, but what matters are the names that we accept and that we claim and that we answer to. Now, on some days, Peter lived into this name. And on other days, as we shall see, he was anything but a rock, maybe more like Jell-O. But having that name, that affirmation, kept reminding him of who he was in God's eyes. And he did go on to be a leader of those early congregations, living out God's love in the world. We come together, choosing to accept the name beloved, child of God, Christian or follower of the way of Christ. And then as we gather together under these names, we choose once a month to share in taking communion, remembering the last meal that Jesus shared with his beloved followers and friends as he prepared to show the world the depth of God's unconditional love. So allowing his life to be taken by Caesar's empire so that all could see that compassion is more powerful than violence and love is stronger than death. So now we'll prepare our hearts to take of this holy meal together. I invite you to pray with me.